Welcome to Trial Talk, insights from experienced New York trial attorney Michael Joseph.
Welcome to Trial Talk, insights from experienced New York trial attorney Michael Joseph. With offices in Manhattan and White Plains, Michael Joseph has spent more than 2 decades representing injured people across New York City and Westchester County in serious accident cases. I'm Lisa Mosby, and today we're talking about hit and run accidents and what legal options victims may still have when the driver responsible leaves the scene. Welcome, Michael. Thank you so much for joining me again today.
Thank you for having me.
Michael, what legally qualifies as a hit and run accident under New York law?
Well, whenever a driver flees the scene of an accident without stopping and providing information, that's technically a hit and run accident. And obviously, people who have been involved in hit and run accidents or been victimized by hit and run accidents are traumatized because they're injured and yet they have no information as to who the person is who caused this injury. And unfortunately, it can be very difficult cases to try to understand or figure out who actually caused the injury and who fled the scene. It's rare that the surveillance video catches the license plate, so it could be incredibly frustrating. But thankfully, New York law has certain remedies for these people who are victims of hit and runs, so they're not completely out of luck.
And then when someone is injured and the driver leaves the scene, what challenges usually come up in their cases?
Well, typically, we're not usually able to bring a case against the driver that ran or fled the scene because they're not usually caught. Probably a very small percentage of the time, they are actually caught. And at times they are actually caught. Usually, it's a driver hits another car and then they flee, and the person who was hit follows in and gets a license plate or calls the police. In a number of the hit and run accidents that we have to deal with, unfortunately, it's usually a pedestrian who's hit, and then the driver flees and they're not able to get a license plate, or there's not surveillance that the car can be identified. So in those cases, what we're able to do is if the person has their own insurance policy or has a policy in the household that covers a car. Every policy in New York has a mandatory clause for what's called uninsured or unidentified motor vehicle accidents. Generally, that means that you were injured by a car and the car fled the scene, or you can't identify who the driver is. Some of the challenges are they have a number of deadlines in terms of time. So you have to have called the police within 24 hours of the accident and reported it, or somebody must have reported it to the police. And if you don't do it, you may be out of luck. So typically, you can look to your own insurance company to pay your medical bills and to get compensation for injuries up to your own policy limits. The mandatory minimum in New York is $50,000 for medical bills and $25,000 for pain and suffering. But generally in New York, if you have higher limits for uninsured motorists, you can get more. And usually it correlates based on the significance of your injury. The other things you also have to be wary of are within 30 days of the accident, you have to fill out an application for what's called no-fault benefits, which is the general application to get lost wage reimbursement and medical bills. Additionally, you also have to provide an uninsured motorist affidavit or application that provides the basic information to the insurance company. If you don't do it within the time limits, you may be out of luck. So it's really important that if you are hit by a car that fled the scene, that you contact an experienced hit and run accident lawyer.
And Michael, this is just an aside, but no fault is different from state to state across the country. Can you describe or explain what no fault means in New York?
No fault means generally the insurance company has to provide benefits irrespective of fault. So it doesn't really matter if you were at fault or someone else was at fault. As long as you're insured in on the policy, you generally get your medical bills paid and you get lost wages up to a certain cap that's in the insurance policy. So
Thank you.
that's different than, say, for example, damages where you have to prove fault to get recovery for pain and suffering.
Okay. And then what types of evidence can help identify the driver's responsibility for a hit and run crash?
But probably in 90% of the time, we're not able to identify the driver. The only time we're actually able to identify the driver is either if the police catch them. Sometimes we've seen cases where it's drunk driving, for example. After they hit one person, they continue on and they get pulled over for drunk driving. And the police can kind of backtrack and figure out that they were the driver involved in the other call they just got. Or sometimes there's surveillance video that the police are able to recover that identifies or catches a license plate. But 90% of the time, we're not really able to identify them. That's why New York's uninsured motorist benefits are so important to people who have been involved in or been victimized by a hit and run accident.
You knew exactly where I was going with that. What my thoughts were with all of the technology we have, the surveillance cameras, traffic cameras in nearby businesses, we can capture information from those folks. Do you hire investigators to pursue that avenue if someone comes to you in a hit and run case?
Usually it's been our experience that cameras looking out from stores don't usually catch license plates because they're at an angle. So, for example, the license plate is traveling perpendicular to most surveillance cameras. Occasionally, if there's a red light camera or a city run camera that's looking directly at the um, where the driver passed through at an intersection, then sometimes we can get it. But more often than not, we can't.
Interesting. That number is staggering to me. I had no idea it was so high. So, Michael, are pedestrians and cyclists especially vulnerable in hit and run crashes in New York City?
Well, they're vulnerable in the sense that they're not able to necessarily chase down the car and get the information for the individual that hit them. And certainly, cyclists, like we have in New York, Uber Eats guys and DoorDash guys who are on e-bikes, are very vulnerable just by the fact that they're on the road so often. So they're on congested roads in New York City, and the likelihood they're involved in any kind of accident, including hit and runs, is dramatically increased just by the fact that the amount of time that they spend on the road with cars. So certainly a lot of the same rules apply. If a cyclist is hit by a uninsured or unidentified motorist, they have the right to look to their own policy for uninsured motorist benefits. And for people who don't own a car or who don't have a car in the household, they can also apply to a state fund that basically steps in and takes the place of the uninsured motorist benefits that would be provided by their own insurance company if they did have a car. And that's generally called the Motor Vehicle Accident Indemnification Corp. That likewise requires a reported accident or proof of a reported accident within 24 hours. And there's an application and affidavit and no fault application that also has to be filled out within 30 days to be eligible for those benefits. So if you're injured in an accident, with a driver that flees the scene, it's very important to contact a experienced attorney in New York who has experience handling hit run accident cases.
And then let's talk about damages. Can someone pursue, damages financially after a hit and run? There's no person to go after. But again, does their own insurance come into play in that scenario?
Basically, what happens is either your own insurance or the Motor Vehicle Accident Indemnification Corp will step in the shoes of the insurance company for the tortfeasor, the person who hit and ran. So they would provide the same benefits, the minimum benefits under New York law that insurance company would have provided had that driver remained at the scene.
Michael, you touched a little bit on cyclists, but can you elaborate on what the remedy would be for a cyclist who was involved in a hit and run?
Okay, so if a cyclist was injured because and hit by a car and fled the scene, in general they have the same remedies as a pedestrian, with the exception of if they were actually working at the time, they would get workers' comp benefits to pay for their medical bills and their lost wages. Now, one thing you have to remember is a lot of the delivery people such as DoorDash or Uber Eats are actually considered independent contractors, so they're not eligible for workers' compensation. So, in general, most cyclists, if you're hit by a car and either you're an independent contractor working or you're just riding a bike and not in the course of your employment, in general, you would have to look to your own insurance company or the insurance company of any car in the household where you live to provide both no fault benefits and uninsured motorist benefits. And if like a lot of people in New York, if you live in an apartment, don't own a car, live by yourself or with a roommate that also doesn't have a car, then you have to make the application to MVAC, which is the Motor Vehicle Accident Indemnification Corp. And you can get the benefits through that. through that entity, which will provide the basic no-fault benefits of lost wages and medical. It'll pay the medical bills, and then you can also pursue a claim for damages up to the minimum policy or minimum coverage, which is $25,000 for pain and suffering. It doesn't matter how badly hurt you are. 25,000 is the maximum for a motor vehicle accident indemnification claim. That's why if you have insurance or you have better limits, it's always preferable to go through your own limits if you have it.
So, Michael, if somebody is working on behalf of a company when they are involved in a hit and run, does the company have any liability to cover them at all?
If you're in the course of your employment and you're hit by a vehicle that flees the scene, in general, the company that you're employed by has to provide workers' compensation benefits. Now, also, if you're in a company car, you can then pursue an uninsured motorist claim against the insurance company for the car that you're in. So there's a difference between, for example, a cyclist and a pedestrian who's working versus a employee of a company that's operating a vehicle. If you're if you're a pedestrian, you're a cyclist, and you get hit by a vehicle, you would get workers' compensation benefits, but then you would have to look to your own insurance company or to MVAC for coverage or to be able to sue or get compensation for personal injuries. However, if you're in a company vehicle and you're hit by a vehicle that flees the scene, in that case, you would be able to then get workers' compensation benefits, but you would also be able to present a claim or make a claim against the insurance company for the vehicle that you were in, which is really the company's insurance now.
What if you're in an Uber or a Lyft and hit by a car and they flee the scene?
If you're in an Uber or a Lyft or other rideshare vehicles and then they get hit by another car that flees the scene, then the insurance company for that vehicle has to provide the no-fault benefits, and you can also present a claim for damages under that insurance policy or that car's insurance policy. And the good news for people who are injured in a Lyft or a Uber is these cars generally have minimum liability insurance and minimum SUM coverage, or UM coverage, I should say, with high limits. So you're much more likely to have a better recovery because for more significant injuries, because there's going to be higher insurance limits involved in a rideshare accident, where you're presenting an uninsured motorist claim because of the state requirements that these vehicles have certain levels of insurance coverage. And really the company's own internal requirements that drivers working for them have certain insurance coverages on their vehicles.
And I have one final question for you, Michael. Let's wrap this all up for our audience. If someone is injured in a hit and run crash, what should they do the hours and days after the accident to protect their rights?
Well, the most important thing, obviously, is to make sure the accident's reported to the police. So call 911, get the officers out there, document what happened. Even if you're in a hospital, make sure that you called 911 to report the hit and run. Generally, and speaking in the days following, you want to get medical treatment to address any injuries you have, and certainly within 30-day deadline, you want to notify your own insurance company, if you have one, of the fact that the accident occurred. And you also want to speak to an experienced New York hit and run accident lawyer to make sure all the forms are filled out correctly and you've dotted your I's and crossed your T's and preserved your rights to claim.
And we'll leave it there for this episode. Folks, thank you so much for listening to Trial Talk, insights from experienced New York trial attorney Michael Joseph. If you or someone you know was injured in a hit and run accident in New York, visit newyorktriallawyers.org to learn more about your legal options or connect with Michael. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to like, leave a review, and subscribe to the show so that you don't miss the next episode. We'll see you then.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.